I got another one. So I think that sometimes when things don't go right, like I actually met one of the a person who is a author of one of your technical manuals on like on some of your digital audio workstations, and he was saying that one of the main things that you have to appreciate when you're doing creative work is to back up what you're doing, to resave what you're doing. And that's a really creative person to make a statement like that, because he's maybe felt how disenfranchising it feels like, or how disappointing it feels like to do something truly creative and original and have it lost to the ethers because of an oversight or a mistake. But yeah, I think that if you're being creative, that's going to happen to you at some point, try as you may. So this app with the YouTube is like that, where it's very easy for it to delete videos, very easy the way that it is. It'll drop something you just did. But I think that might actually be a challenge that might actually be the universe saying, I don't mean to say the universe arbitrarily, because what my understanding of a universe is can be similar and drastically different than another person's, and none is more or less or necessarily different than the other. And can be all that at once, but that is maybe just a challenge that, yeah, that was cool, but you could have did it better, so let's try it again. So that's maybe that's maybe a great producer in the room, like, yeah, we need another take. So I'm gonna take it that way to just come better. But what I was saying in a video that didn't upload is that when I was a young person, I had a lot of I have a lot of appreciation for like velocity and force and time. Like as a child, that was just something very interesting to me. So like when I learned about like things like Shaka Zulu, and I'd say like, well, he existed in what year? Like 18 what? And that was how many years was that before I was born? How many years was that before my grandma was born? Was my grandma's brother alive at the same time as Shaka Zulu was alive? I would ask questions like that. And how many miles away did they live from Shaka Zulu? And did they ever get into a fight with Shaka Zulu? I would ask them questions like that. But it's just the way that a child will gain references and then contrast those references to form insight. And that's actually what we should be doing in life. But I think that maybe some of our experience in education of being handed preconceived ideas and pre-decided for values and concepts, even as something as straightforward as numbers, we're presented that more arbitrarily and decisive than it necessarily has to be. And I spoke to that in other videos, but that's the way a child will put things together. But so for me, a lot of that had to do with like speed and force. So I'd wonder like, okay, so is a cheetah is a mountain lion faster than a wolf? Or but bears are still fast too, right? But how fast is a bear? And can a jaguar run faster than a bear? But a cheetah is the fastest one, right? But can a cheetah race a car that's on the freeway? But a cheetah is faster than a car on the highway, but not faster than a car on the freeway, right? But if they had to go very far, then the car might be faster, or even the horse might be faster than the cheetah if they had to go very far. But if it was a short distance, the cheetah could get past the horse. So if someone had to run from their life on a horse, they might not get away from the cheetah unless they had. So I would think like that. But if the cheetah was running away from a bullet, but that bullet was a high-powered rifle, but the rifle also had a silencer, would that slow down the bullet, or would the bullet be faster than the cheetah? And then what if it was a air pressure or gunpowder? And what year did they invent gunpowder? And how many fights did they get in that year? That's how I would reason things. But part of that got to the point that when I was a young person, I was something of like I was accurate with like different projectiles. Like sometimes I'd be like around people different degrees my senior, and I put my hands on things that were like toys or almost more serious than toys. But I would sometimes be accurate on marks, and that's because I had a combination of reasoning and like some things I saw on Discovery Channel appreciated that there's actually an arc to a projectile. And so like I think I said in another video that uploaded is that if you factor that arc into the path of a projectile, you can be more accurate in landing on something. And I actually could demonstrate that at a young age. And one or so but then I also spent a lot of time practicing basketball because it was something of a safe space, and I did that all the way from the latter point, the mid to latter point of elementary school, all the way through like the first couple of years of being grown. I would put up a lot of shots that whole time, and I was on different organized basketball, but I also had some I had a limitation anatomically that it wasn't like obvious on the surface, and it didn't stop me from being good at basketball, but I couldn't be entirely as great because of that because of something of a anatomically at that age. But I got it I got support for it when I was grown, so I can do now damn near anything physically. But with it, what I meant to say is that when I engaged both projectiles like that, but also basketball like that, I would get to the point where I could be very accurate, like from a far distance basketball. Like sometimes I did that in games, but I did a lot more practicing alone, where I could be at far distances of a perimeter beyond what's appreciated as a 3-point line, and land shots, put up shots back to back like that. And when I did that at a certain point, one time when I was grown, I was doing that at night, and I could actually have an appreciation for the bias of the rotation of the earth, that you could see. And for me, like a lot of landing things like that is more so repetition. So if you actually approach a 3-pointer just in terms of the arc and the muscle memory, you would have a little bit of the visual depth perception, but what's more so significant is the muscle memory and the arc. You can put up shots like that, and at a certain point you actually feel the bias of the earth, and at that point I think you'd be something of a shooter like that. In terms of sports or something different, just if you could appreciate the bias, you could actually understand and appreciate the bias of the earth. But at that same time, I came across a book right upon being grown called the Wu-Tang Manual, and they were referencing groups like in former times, like in New York City, I think they're still around, such as like the Nations of God as an Earth and the 5% Nation, that appreciate that maybe about 5% have a understanding of who, what, where, why, and how we are as human beings, not the least of which is to appreciate that a human being is all things that can exist, small and great, in any degree of that, can exist equally within what you see as a human being. And I've said in other videos, sometimes you can feel that in certain situations, such as if a weapon were employed on you, heaven forbid, or you receive medicine, or just grace, you would appreciate a human being as a little bit greater than what you normally think of as a human being. But they can articulate that in the Nation of Gods and Earths as maybe 5% of people having a real knack for that, and then maybe 10% having a knack for that, or even a cataloged understanding that might be concealed from the general public, but they use that as an advantage to get over on other people because they haven't appreciated the truest aspect of that, which is that we are one another, in my taste. And you actually can't hurt people if you truly can feel that you are that person. I think and then you would have like 85% who would be maybe deprived of that knowledge, not necessarily worse off for such, because you can have outstanding people that don't need all this fancy learning, but they would be appreciated as blind, deaf, and dumb in certain terms, because they could be manipulated without the truest understanding of who, what, and where, and how they are. And but part of that group, they would quiz each other on things such as like the actual circumference of the earth, and in the radius of the earth. And when I came across that in the Wu-Tang Manual, from some of my experience, like putting up shots, I could actually appreciate that as great as the earth is somewhat of a relative position in absolute terms, as we are existing, because we are existing both on earth and outside of earth, in that there's nothing really limited about us. If you just look at the air in front of you, there's nothing really limited about anything, except for our concept of something is the only thing that limits something. So our concept of ourself can limit ourselves. Our concept of linear time can limit us. But if you have certain references as far as like the actual motion of the earth and the limitation of the earth, and what it means to exist is beyond the limitation of the earth, even though our perspective is emanating from a position on the earth, you can appreciate time and more, or the redundancy and the arbitrariness of the word time from a greater vantage point, and be very centered in what's called present, without necessarily being outstanding or like a religious adept, although you could say that's a degree of being an adept to come to that sensation. But the only reason I say that is that I said in another video to put my money where my mouth is that perhaps we can lead with other parts of our sensation. So I've referenced so far ears, eyes, and nose, and now I want to say one part of feeling, to really lead with feeling, is to sometimes if you can really get into a sense of feeling the rotation of the earth. I think that's actually what people feel when they're drunk sometimes. When the world is spinning, when you're drunk like that, it's actually always spinning like that, but you're more so loose, and you can account for that, and you don't feel it in your conscious mind, but we're really always undergoing those forces. If you could feel that while sober, and it just kind of sink into that a little bit, and actually maybe feel the rotation of the earth, you could lead with that, and you can think differently with that sensation and lead with feeling.